Good morning and magandang umaga from Toronto, Canada, and good evening, magandang gabi po if you're in Manila, Philippines. Welcome to the Narrative Through Global Space screening event. Today is the last day of screening in thematic entitled Constructing Self Through Experimental Femininities and Queerness in Film. And to start us off, I introduce to you Natalie Waldberger, who will be doing the land acknowledgement.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. We would like to start by acknowledging the ancestral and traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, who are the original owners and custodians of the land on which we stand and create. In a relational spirit, we are grateful for the opportunity to carry out creative and intellectual work on Turtle Island, the present-day home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples, and respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in forging decolonial relations with Indigenous and other peoples within Turtle Island, the Philippines, and beyond. With the recognition that this talk is taking place in a virtual space and folks are joining us from various locations, I ask that you each take the time to acknowledge the rightful stewards of the land on which you are currently situated and reflect on the harms of the past and consider how we can move forward in the spirit of reconciliation. In the light of recent and even more discoveries of residential school atrocities, I'd like to take the time to share these words from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. The cumulative negative impact of residential schools is a legacy of unresolved trauma passed from generation to generation. Please join me for a moment of silence to honor the generation of children stolen from their families as we mourn with our Indigenous friends. Thank you, and now a few words from our President, Ana Serrano.
To those of you in Canada, sa inyong lahat sa Pilipinas, magandang gabi. My name is Ana Serrano, and I am the President and Vice Chancellor of OCAD University here in Toronto. For the next 5 days, we are gathering to watch the inaugural screening of 10 experimental short films from the unique and innovative virtual residency program, Narratives Through Global Space. I want to acknowledge that for us in Toronto, this event is taking place on the ancestral and traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, who are the original owners and custodians of the land on which we stand and create. It is my great honor to be welcoming you all for this inaugural screening of Narratives Through Global Space, a unique and innovative virtual residency that brought together 20 filmmakers from 9 countries, spanning 5 time zones, led by 5 faculty across 3 universities: OCAD University, Mapua University, and NASCAD. I'd also like to say that it's particularly important for me to be doing this because I am Filipino, and seeing these kinds of collaborations take place between the Philippines, where I was born, and Canada, which is what I call home now, is really heartening. These screenings are a testament to the power of connection, inventiveness, and creativity as we prove once more that our capacity to create together is limitless. Led by artists, educators, and researchers, Professor Julius Manapul and Natalie Waldberger from OCAD University, Professors John Javier Chavez and Roberto Ang from Mapua University, and Dr. Marissa Largo from NASCAD, Narratives Through Global Space 2021 showcases these series of 10 experimental short films from creators around the world. 10 Mapua University students in the Philippines collaborated with 10 creators from OCAD University, hailing from Canada, Portugal, Mexico, Iran, India, Hong Kong, China, and South Korea. These narratives bring together a variety of talent across various domains, from filmmakers, visual artists, digital artists, animators, photographers, writers, and musicians with diverse experiences to respond to issues of gender, sexuality, religion, language, and identity through global space. All of this during a pandemic. Despite time zone differences, distance, and of course the current isolation and different contexts in each of these spaces caused by that pandemic, these creative thinkers and makers have defied obstacles through daily virtual connections. These 20 creators were not able to meet in person during the production of this project, but their ideas, passions, and visions have collided into this one collaborative force. So sit back, turn off your cell phones, and enjoy this outstanding show of talent. Congratulations to all of you students who participated in this event, in this series. And it's really remarkable to be able to see the work that you have produced during these such difficult and uncertain times. And I know that you audience members out there will really enjoy the show.
In our first film, entitled In Our Being, Sa Aming Pagkatao by Ghislan Timm and Jann Earl Q. Madariaga. In Our Being is an experimental autobiographical film that converged 2 queer people of color perspectives from the Philippines and Canada into one narrative body. As a cross-continental virtual production, the 2 artists converged their 2 queer racialized narratives that discusses the ever-changing self as an intersectional but alienated being. Accordingly, it uses a multidisciplinary approach combining analog film, collage art, along with digital and performative art to create this surreal and evocative visual experience, to feel like the audience are given a chance to look into our own subconscious. Through the internal and external flux of self-concept, trying to find stability in how others see us versus how we personally see ourselves. Our bodies continue to yearn to grasp the stillness in the ever-changing self. These intersectional constructions of the past, current, and future serves as a collective entity in defining oneself. It focuses on ideas of alienation from the self and others, and the internal conversations that become inevitable in this feeling of otherness. Through the visuals are abstract, there is an inherent linear structure to how it was organized that grounds the narrative, beginning with the mind, which shows this distinct but coexisting identities and how and shows us how that impacts our physical manifestation. There is this lack of unity, but as we journey, the body exudes this yearning for that stillness. It is this progressive metamorphosis within ourselves. We see it to be separated parts, yet there is still this mixture of all these visuals, which tries to allude to the complex and unending conversation within the subconscious, and that they are not separate entities. How all these aspects of the mind define us. In this yearning, we find reconciliation. It is cathartic and allows a greater understanding of self. Once again, I introduce you to the film In Our Being, Sa Aming Pagkatao. In our next film, entitled Parang Yiyang, It Seems the Same by China Fei G. Marin and Jessica Liu. Parang Yiyang is a hybrid experimental music experience telling the story of two distinct worlds of two people living in different time zones with diverse cultures and traditions, yet aiming for a common goal, to know their own selves more than anyone could ever do, to be able to belong in their respected circles. These people treat this journey as their personal mission, thinking that to be able to make their contribution into improving their lives and surroundings, to be valid and effective, they must first be able to find their identities and understanding their purpose in the world they dwell in. Parang yang, which literally translate to it seems the same, would depict that these two people have a common goal to accomplish, but have different ways to achieve it, considering the major factor of being in two distinct, diverse countries, which would mean different societal issues to get involved in. Once again, I introduce you to film Parang Yiyang, It Seems the Same.
Vision, but I can't help them, so I'm just standing here. Voices, but they're just in my head, can't comprehend. I've been raised by the rage, told me not to dwell too long in this ongoing rage. Said I should just take whatever is served to me in this randomly made shape. So I ended up safe in town, leaving neighbors found next day on the ground. Visions, are they real or are you cheating me, stealing what's left of my weight? Voices, is it truth or are you playing me, dangling keys to unlock this cage? I was taught from a very young age to expect the least of your own father's grace. Memories never taught you love, so you must be brave to begin this way. Saan na nga ba patungo? Itong paglalakbay ko. Uno sa'y samot-saring ngunit di ko pa rin mawari kung saan. Saan ako dadalhin ng malakas na hangin parang bagyo ang paparating. Dami ko nasabi tungkol sa aking sarili, pero bakit ang bibig parang tikom? Saan naririnig? Ikaw, anong problema mo?
那你呢？你有什么烦恼？
Now it's the portion where we get to talk to the filmmakers. And for the audience, if you have any questions to relate to our filmmakers, there is a Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Just please write down any questions you have. So let me start introducing each panel discussant in this thematic constructing self through experimental femininities and queerness in film. First, we have Ghislan Timm, is an experimental filmmaker and visual artist based in Toronto. They are currently studying integrated media at OCAD University and have shown works both locally and internationally. They are influenced by their Afro-Caribbean heritage, Afrofuturism, sound, and cinema, frequently appropriating archival films and imagery to create collages and shape non-linear narratives that often reflects on their multicultural queer identity and methodologies and romanticization of home and homecoming. Next, we have Jann Earl Q. Madariaga is a Filipino multimedia artist who is based in Cavite City. His academic training has allowed a multidisciplinary knowledge in creating visual art through digital means of design, film, photography, and illustrations. Moreover, his work predominantly involves using realism in portraiture to tell stories of melancholy in human experiences. His work is mainly based upon aesthetic principle, art for art's sake. But as the future explores his artistic aspiration, as seen through his new partnered film In Our Being, aims to show this new creative identity to become more experimental and incorporate his self-identity of queerness to evoke and create these introspective yet surreal experience. In the next film, we have China Fei Ji Marian, who is currently in digital film studies at Mapua University. She likes to compose poems, which she makes some songs. Aside from writing poems, she also likes long travels, and this makes her brain function into thinking of film concepts. May they be relevant to her current surroundings or just simply things that entered her mind. She has always been fond of Japan, especially their food. As a result of her fondness, Japanese films, specifically those with particular themes, have great impact on her way of thinking when it comes to storytelling. Next, we have Jessica Liu. Jessica Liu is a Chinese-Canadian multidisciplinary artist who has just graduated from OCAD U's drawing and painting program. Through the reiteration of the digital material and audio, Jessica's work unfolds a story in fragments and interludes telling her lineage, transition, and rebirth. We so often, our personal histories as linear, in the experiences of being the first child of her family line to be born outside of China, her work wants to say there is so much more than a one-directional story. Jessica's influence are her experiences and that of those around her. Her work strives to encourage viewers to listen, yield, and interact to the telling of the human being stories. And our guest faculty member, Richard Fung. Richard Fung is an artist and writer and professor emeritus at OCAD University. Richard's video deal with topics including the intersection of race and sexuality, the legacy of colonialism in the Caribbean and its diaspora, justice, and Peace in Israel-Palestine, Police Racism, and his own Chinese Trinidadian family. His videos include Orientations, Lesbian and Gay Asians, 1984, and its Redux Reorientation in 2016. My Mother's Place in 1990, and Sea in the Blood in 2000. Richard has published numerous articles in journals and anthologies and is the co-author with Monica King Gagnon of 13 Conversations on Art and Cultural Race Politics. Among other honors, he is the recipient of the Bell Canada Award for Outstanding Achievements in Video Art, the Toronto Arts Award for Media Art, the Keisler Award for Significant Influence on the Field of the LGBTQ Studies, and the Bonham Center Award for a Distinguished Contribution to the Public Understanding of Sexual Diversity in Canada. I introduce you to all the artists and our guest faculty. Take it away, Richard.
Thanks, Julius. And thanks for inviting me to respond to these films. I'll start by saying that I found both films absolutely stunning, and I was impressed by your skill and your aesthetic control. You're each working within a different subgenre of experimental media that have distinct roots and preoccupations. And I found that the pairing of these two things together to be both complementary and satisfying. So congratulations to whoever put them together. I think it might be Marissa. There's a lot to say about each film, but with my 3 to 5 minutes, I will pick out only a couple of points to stick with my time limit. First, starting with In Our Being. First, I have to say I was intrigued by the juxtaposition of the Caribbean and the Philippines because both places were deeply impacted by colonialism. First the Spanish and then others. And there is an interesting echo culturally between, the place that I grew up in Trinidad and Tobago, which was the last colony to be won by the British from the Spanish, and my time in the Philippines. There's so many echoes between those two island spaces, those two archipelagos, actually. In this work, I see a kind of meditation on the body, gender, and identity. And it also speaks to me about both social and internal processes, and I found that really interesting. And I detect, as the write-up says, both alienation, but also this desire for wholeness. I see the film as structured in a binary, but a kind of porous binary, which again is very engaging. On the one hand of this porous binary, I see the image of a torso that is coded as masculine, but if not necessarily male. And again, it's not an essentialist representation of masculinity. The layered fluttering of the arms renders them diaphanous and luminous. On the other hand, I see when it starts, a disassembled body, a female body, possibly a black body. I'm looking at the shot of the head, the top of the hair. And significantly, I think it's a moving image of still photographs. The signifiers of femininity are evoked through lipstick and nail polish, but interestingly, they float over the body, which is just coded as human. So what I'm seeing here is a kind of social process of gendering. And again, it's not an uncomplicated essentialist femininity, as I was struck that the painted mouth can be both seen in the act of biting and of kissing, both aggression and gentleness. And so there's a sort of Freudian quality to the film itself. Eventually the torso and the floating parts merge, but the amalgamation doesn't settle into a kind of quiet, easy stasis, but possibly triggers more volatility. And I found, again, that lack of a sort of easy resolution really interesting. Again, because so often the question of the binary or the gender binary can be simplistically stated, and I was really struck by the complexity of this gesture. In this work, I see a conversation with early avant-garde art, particularly related to Dada and Surrealism. And in the disjointed body that starts the film, I see a particular affinity with the work of Hannah Höch, who was the only one in the Berlin Dada group. She was one of the originators of photomontage, which the film starts with. Her work was critically engaged with the notion of the new woman, and she was queer. She had, I think, 2 husbands, but she also had one very long-term relationship with a woman artist. The eye seems to me to be a kind of nod to Buñuel, Un Chien Andalou, which I was actually trying to figure out whether it was lifted from that or just kind of an homage to that film. And in this fluttering of the arms and the hands, I saw, it reminded me or brought to mind Duchamp's Nude Descending a Staircase, except it's a kind of reverse process of Duchamp's work, in which Duchamp was actually trying to capture in painting the movement that was revealed by the new technology, the then new technology of cinema, practiced by people like Etienne Jules Marie and Edward Muybridge. So all in all, I found this a really rich and compelling work, and aesthetically really kind of resolved and unified. I'll move to It Seems the Same Now. And the meaning of this piece for me is much harder to pin down, to sum up, as it's composed of a number of fragments. But I think it's this very fragmentation, what I think of as a kind of articulate incoherence, the restless shuttling between the personal and the public, the wide shot and the close-up, that to me mirrors the contemporary world, and it mirrors it back through the lens of a generation. I'm one of those people who I'm not a digital native. The cell phone came late in my life, etc. I actually barely use my cell phone. So in the lyrics of the film, and I think the lyrics carry a lot of the content, I hear kind of snatches of the following: the pressure of parental and societal expectations for economic success and normativity, and I would read heteronormativity, and that's partly because of the juxtaposition of the family images at the panda park with the deer. I hear a cry against apathy, the line of sleeping while neighbors succumb, and I think I'm looking at images of COVID. I feel a kind of yearning for connection, for love, and the word love is both in English and in Chinese. And then the final line, which implicates the viewer, what's your problem, right? While the inset in Our Being, the first film, recalls a soft edge vignetting of silent movies, in the opening shot of this film, the HD image squeezes into a kind of vertical framing of the cell phone. And so what I'm seeing here is an artistic reference to the electronic age, the post-TV age, the post-video age, post-karaoke, post-music video. And in fact, I think the effective power of this film is due to its sensitive blending of images, lyrics rendered as text, and the score. And it's the tonal shifts of the music that cues us to the film's structure. I found myself sort of relying on that to guide me through the material, the kind of tone of the film, the music. And to me, this film revels in the artisanal footage, the non-professional image, and it really immediately made me think of the essay In Defense of the Poor Image by the Japanese-German filmmaker, artist, and theorist Hito Steyerl. And I'm just going to end with a lengthy quote by Steyerl, because I think it really captures that in a way without having seen the film, I think how the film functions to me. So she says, the poor image is a copy in motion. Its quality is bad, its resolution substandard. As it accelerates, it deteriorates. It is a ghost of an image, a preview, a thumbnail, an errant idea, an itinerant image distributed for free, squeezed through slow digital connections, compressed, reproduced, ripped, remixed, as well as copied and pasted into other channels of distribution. poor images are poor because they are heavily compressed and travel quickly. They lose matter and gain speed, but they also express a condition of dematerialization shared not only with the legacy of conceptual art, but above all with contemporary modes of semiotic production. The poor image thus constructs anonymous global networks just as it creates a shared history. It builds alliances as it travels, provokes translation or mistranslation, and creates new publics and debates. By losing its visual substance, it recovers some of its political punch and creates a new aura around it. This aura is no longer based on the permanence of the original, but on the transience of the copy. And I think that really sums up what I think this work is doing, which I found really profound, actually, in terms of placing us into the kind of age of anxiety, the current age of anxiety that we're living in. So I'd like to end by congratulating both sets of filmmakers. And I'll start with a question. I found both of them conceptually and aesthetically really kind of coherent and well thought through. And so when I found out that you've actually been meeting for a year, it kind of explained something about how that was able to be achieved. I'm going to start with Ghislan and Jann and ask you to talk. I'm going to ask both of you questions around your collaboration, but I was interested in this kind of the aesthetic consistency of the work. And I'm interested in the process in which you settled on this, the particular aesthetic of the film and its reference to the early avant-garde. And I'm wondering whether it's a long-standing interest for both of you or how you came to that decision to render your idea in this way. So that's Ghislan and Jann, if you want to start.
Yeah, so we definitely started at the beginning with just sharing like videos, art pieces, just any sort of media that we could pass back and forth that we were very keenly interested in. And so through that, we found like a lot of similarities with what we were drawn to, whether it was within like cinematic techniques or editing or sound or themes. And then as well as we started to explore like how our own personal aesthetics outside of this project could be merged together. Jann, would you like to also?
Hello. Yes. So at the beginning, this isn't actually a big part of my previous artistic expression. So I wanted the project to be an opportunity to try out new things, and at the back of my mind, I've always wanted to try something more experimental and surrealistic. And seeing the work of Ghislan really inspired me to actually pursue that. And when we were partnered, I was very keen on like bringing that type of cinema to what we should incorporate in telling our stories. Yes.
So the reference to the early avant-garde came from both of your interests. You both happen to have that?
Yeah, I think it was like partially that, where when we were sending works, we both had like a bit of a background or interest in cinema history and reflecting that. So within some of the pieces that we were sending, like through Jann, I was learning a lot about certain works and pieces that I wasn't familiar with. And so it was definitely like on top of like a collaboration, also an education for me.
Great, thank you. So I'm gonna switch to the next group. Again, I'm interested in your collaboration, and the work here, the original material is actually so divergent in a way, and that's what I found intriguing, precisely because, I mean, both films work so well. The first because it's so coherent, and the second because it's so disparate. And I'm wondering how you work through your aesthetic process and who is going to do what. And China, is that you singing?
Yes, and Jessica as well in her part. So yeah, we both sang in the film.
That's what I was wondering, because so were you matched because you both happened to sing, or Is that how you came together? It was just a kind of lucky coincidence because you both have really engaging voices.
We actually had this phase wherein we get to like choose our partners in this collaboration, and from there I actually chose Jessica to be my partner because I found out that we actually have the same interest, which is producing music, and from there we just started to get along and plan things out. So yeah.
Maybe Jessica, you can talk a little bit about your process of editing. I mean, I'm not talking so much about the technical aspect of editing, but really the editing of the ideas together, because that seemed to have been perhaps a really complicated process, I'm guessing.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, and I'm very so touched by your sincerity in the 3 to 5 minutes response. I really liked that, and yeah, I can first touch upon, I liked how you described our relationship, the two of our groups, and I just want to share a bit. I think from my perspective as well, just watching it now, I loved the end of In Our Being, the video where the two beings like was going like this and became one and kind of like exploded into a blank, and I immediately thought of the like two black holes in the universe, and even like the black background reminded me of that, or two stars like coming together and exploding and being that sort of like very specific like happening. And then China and I were very much in our process as well, kind of like orbiting stars or like gravitating around something like the Earth and the Moon or something. We basically had, we started out with a virtual whiteboard and then put all of our ideas in and then made like connections, but never really forced to come up with a one like overall theme or one look that we were going for. Because I think we're both kind of all over the place and have interests like very far away from each other. And the same with the process of, we started out with the music editing. So China made a beat, that sort of the upbeat beat at the beginning, and then did like a rapping kind of verse on top of that and sent it over to me. And then I listened to it and listened to her lyrics and then responded to it and did on that same beat, just extended it and then used her same rhythm and then wrote my own verse and just continued from it, from my perspective. And it kind of went back and forth like that. And then sometimes like I would decide or she would decide just to change it. And there wouldn't be like too much being like, oh, like why, but we just sort of let it happen. When it's changed, oh, okay, I'll add on top of that. And then very organic. I think China wrote part of the description, which I thought was very well. It was like to know ourselves more than anyone else can. So we just sort of let ourselves express and put that together. Yeah.
Thanks. I mean, I was saying that I saw the kind of tonal shifts in the film, giving me a kind of cues as to the structure of the film. But the at the visual plane, there was also, again, I keep coming back, for me, it's a kind of punctum of the beach shot, which kind of is an intervention into all the other kind of imagery, its clarity. It's still in the vertical framing, but then it immediately kind of like twists back into the kind of, again, it doesn't remain that kind of pristine element. So I was wondering again, just if I could ask you another question, both of you. I was impressed by the visual archive of the film, the kind of family footage, the shot that just, I mean, what was impressive about the opening shot of the kind of shopping mall at the background and the kind of rickshaws in the front is the ordinariness of the image, which itself is very hard to capture, actually, the ordinary. It's something that I've been trying when I go to Trinidad and I shoot in Trinidad. I go for try to find the ordinariness, because it's hard to move beyond the image of tourism or the image of disaster journalism or whatever. And it's just that kind of ordinary modernity that, again, is striking about those opening images, but also the image track. If you could talk about that a little bit.
Can you rephrase the question?
So what is the question?
I mean, can you rephrase
Yeah, sure. So can you talk about how you decided which images to choose, and which is the images that come from each of you, perhaps? You can start.
Jessica, would you like to speak first?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I think because of our situation throughout the year, we had our archives to look into, and that's something that we recognized. Like, I think, China mentioned before, we when we were choosing partners, we had a presentation time, and we just put out all our stuff, and then we were attracted to each other, all that archival stuff. And I think it was China first that put that first image there, and I thought it was a good start, because it represented just our daily environment, and I sort of responded to that. And I was at home in my room, so I just took some videos of my daily life, as well as things that I was thinking during this year in my home, things that relate to, like, just questioning what China and I are also doing our thesis throughout this year and last year. So there's a lot of other work going on in using archives to remember other memories and revisit them, and then seeing how our identity has changed or that has defined it, and bringing that here. So it's a lot about using, I mean, from my perspective, using everything I could from within to tell a story, instead of like maybe from before going out to find materials or going specific to a site to get inspired or to film per se. But it was very much about staying here and reaching to what I already have. Yeah.
Thank you. And I have to say, I really appreciated the fact that the beach image also was cloudy. It wasn't sunny. I have another question, but I know, Julius, if you want to move on.
No, it's okay. Let's continue. I'm just watching any kind of questions popping up. Right now, we have no questions. So yeah, let's keep on going. Let's have the conversation between faculties and students.
Okay, so a couple of days ago, during COVID in Toronto, one of the things we do, since we can't go inside, is to go for walks. So I went for a long walk with two friends of mine, both queer academics, one Turkish, one Vietnamese. And suddenly one of my friends said, "What's the gayest place you've ever been to in your life?" And I said, without hesitation, the Philippines. And one of the things that's interesting for me to observe, it as being a long time kind of, I guess, gay activist, or involved in gay activism, and thinking about the kind of questions around sexuality and gender, is the way in which, as the kind of gay rights agenda in North America becomes fulfilled, there's a sort of missionary gaze turned toward the rest of the world in terms of saving the rest of the world, saving the gays and the queers around the world, right? It's a kind of problematic homo-nationalist vision. And in that, there's a kind of a developmental narrative that, we have arrived and everybody else is behind. And I was teaching at OCAD a course called Making Gender, LGBTQ Studio. And one of the films that I love to show, I don't know if you know the film, it's called Outrun, which is about Lad Lad, which is the first queer political party in the world, which was in the Philippines. And showing that film to Canadian audiences, a mixed Toronto classroom, was really sort of eye-opening for people, because here there was a way in which, in whatever year that film was made, it's a few years old now, and it's a few years ago that Lad Lad ran, was so much more advanced in terms of political discourse than what was happening in Canada. Like in Canada, we couldn't imagine an LGBT political party. So there's a way in which, you know, when you're working in different parts of the world, and, you know, as I mentioned, I'm from Trinidad, I still keep a relationship there, but I've also spent time in India, teaching in India, and also looking at how in each of these sites, the questions around gender and sexuality are in different places. It doesn't mean that there is one place that we're all striving towards. So I'm interested, given that this is the program on femininities and queerness, if you could each talk, and maybe I'll start with the first film again, about how you thought through the way of representing the questions of gender and sexuality in your work. What kind of discussions did you have? What kind of things were you thinking about? What kind of things were you thinking you shouldn't do? What kind of things were you thinking you might want to do to engage an audience? Because you're actually, one of the things that's again interesting and challenging in this project is you're dealing with a global transnational audience, right? So for instance, if I do a film and I know that film is going to play in Canada, or I'm trying to think, I want to address a Trinidadian audience, I know the context in which I'm intervening. I know what kind of things to avoid, what kind of things to say, what kind of things need to be explained. So how did you think, what process did you think about thinking of that? Because your work focuses so much on those issues. Jann and Ghislan, if you can start.
Yeah, definitely. Jann, do you want to start first?
Yes. So I think going back to our discussion, we really discussed things that we are very passionate in, including our social advocacies, and queerness did come up big time. So we did in the process of collaborating, we further discuss in including and using queerness as a substantial subtext in creating the narrative. So I guess the thing that we have to be careful is, as Ghislan always emphasizes, not speaking for others. And that's why we brought solution to that by keeping the ambiguity and keeping it personal. So in a sense, it transcends space and time, and it would allow a more ubiquitous interpretation.
Yeah, and speaking upon as well as what Jann has spoken about, I definitely within our conversations, for me, definitely referencing back to my lived experience as a Black queer person, I felt that in a way, if I focused on my own personal experiences, that in the way can build bridges with others instead of focusing on sort of queerness being this sort of monolith and trying to not have this sort of savior complex within when having discussions or having representation within it. And as well as acknowledging that even within our film, though we have our identities within it, it is intersectional. And we do have to keep in mind that there will be times where we cannot reach the whole public or viewers and speak for or about others. And so it always comes back to within your own community and your own experience and making sure that you stay honest with that, because if you're, I feel like, honest with your own self, it can draw ties with others. And I think that was definitely something that me and Jann, again, like it was just such a long process within having these discussions, and as well as even talking to Julius about it throughout our residency definitely helped within having a more clear understanding of how we would approach it as like filmmakers.
Thanks. I mean, there's a complexity to how gender is rendered in the film. So I'm thinking now, there's a way in which, as I mentioned, the lips and the nails kind of float above the kind of black and white plane that constitutes the rest of the film. So it suggests a kind of social process. It's not part of the body, it's on the body. But at the same time, you have the application of the lipstick. So it's a kind of represents a kind of agency in terms of applying that lipstick. And I know that, in the last 2 years, there's been a kind of femme revival in a way. Kim Milan is sort of one of the advocates of the reclaiming of feminists, etc. So there's I really appreciated the way that it's not an easy invocation of gender, the complexity of it. For China and Jessica, your work in this frame is much more subtle, much more indirect, and there's a way in which queer as a verb a while ago became, like we queered this and we queered that, right? So there's a way in which queerness is now, in a sense, particularly in the academic world, is disentangled from sexuality sometimes. I'm wondering how you thought of thinking through those questions in your film.
Yeah, I was thinking about this question, and China and I were just talking a bit, and gender never really, or sexuality never really came up in our conversations. But in our preparing, I remember I wrote down, Julius mentioned there's like a complexity of being queer and a person of color that transcends space and time. And I think that's what we relate to, and how I think our films connect, as we were talking about before. And as I wrote down a lot of words like repetition, universe, and like non-linear in the imagery in our being. And I think we relate to that in our way of storytelling. That, I mean, I can only speak on behalf of like being female and my influences, like my mother, just seeing a difference where the story is transcends beyond space and time. It goes back, and things are like, they revive in me in the next generation, and they don't have a start or an ending or even a climax, or I think that's what came through naturally in our storytelling. That's my response and how I've been relating. Mm-hmm.
China?
I think I have nothing further to add. So yeah.
There's a way in which, as I said, that there's a notion of queerness as a kind of unsettling to make the normal strange. And so there's a way in which I think your work does that, Jessica and China. So Julius, I'll turn it back to you if you want to.
Sure, thank you. We have a few questions from the question board. Those are amazing conversations. And from working with the students, I really found that the whole idea of, and I think Richard touched upon this, about queerness beyond identity of sexuality, but as a figurative word of the otherness, and having this kind of project of people of color and people of different narratives was really almost a grounding point for those communications. I love the idea of, because I remember Jessica and China, when we were talking, it was like, oh, so is this going to be like an experimental music video? Where I found it fascinating, where you're using sound and music to collage beyond images, right? And with Jann and Ghislan, it was this tension between the archive of the collaging of both bodies and what those represent. So it almost created like a vision board. And I guess maybe with Marissa's, before I go to the Q&A, I'm really curious about Marissa's idea between the title and how you kind of saw both of the film kind of collides together.
Thank you. Thanks, Julius. And thank you, Richard, for those just the stunning assessment and reading of the films that really enrich my appreciation. So when I was curating the films together, I was thinking about how both of your works are really experimental and aesthetically avant-garde, and are really about a refusal of the normative. So refusal of, you know, the ideas of femininity or familial obligation, or a refusal of gender roles. And so I saw those two films as very complementary, and also the focus on music. And if I can ask a question at this point regarding the music, both have a stunning use of musical scores. Jessica and China, original music. China, you remind me, first of all, I love Tagalog rap. It's just fantastic. I love hearing it. It reminds me of Ruby Ibarra, who is a Filipino-American rapper and is very politically charged, and it is very much about critiquing U.S. imperialism. I refer you to Ruby if you are all at all interested in Tagalog rap that's happening in the US and Canada. And then Jessica, your haunting musical score reminds me of kind of like a Billie Eilish or Grimes, but with more of a biting critique at what is expected of you, and in the and Jann and Ghislan's in your soundtrack, I was really struck by the resonating heartbeat. And this is something that I find common in both of your works, the idea of this post music video, that they're both so esoteric, but then I have this very visceral feeling when I listen to the works. So perhaps you could talk a little bit about the music, the soundtracks of your films, and how that helps to mobilize your ideas of embodiment and identity. Thanks.
And I guess this question goes with both films, right? Yes. Jann, Ghislan, you guys want to start?
Yeah, sure.
So going back to Marissa's first.
Oh, Jann, you're on mute.
So, Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah,
yep.
Sorry about that. Okay, going back to Marissa's first comment about the structure of the films being experimental, I think that's an interesting analysis of the structure. The formal elements itself is a challenge to normalcy, and I think that does really work with our narrative, because being honest with queerness does in itself is political, and the narrative and the structure that we pick being experimental, I think really helps emphasize the complexity that is almost not existent in dominant ideologies that always try to perpetrate queerness as as simplistic and over-sexualized. So, and on the other hand, going to the music, personally, what we decided on picking on the music is a bit more, I guess, formal. We didn't really embed a conceptual value to it, but just so that the music is very atmospheric and doesn't really mess up with the visual narrative itself. So I think
Yeah.
Ghislan has a lot more to say.
Yeah, definitely finding the balance between having these kind of striking visuals and not having a sort of powerful soundtrack that would almost overlap it and speak over the visuals, if that makes sense. And so finding something that is kind of adheres to like the pacing of the movement, especially because there's so much performance within the bodies as they collide, that we wanted to find something that sort of like gives the viewers a sort of space to breathe, because it is definitely like with the flashing lights, especially towards the end, you sort of need that space to really take in what you're seeing and not have like anything that's so intrusive with audio wise.
Thanks. Yeah, it is a well-balanced curatorial between sound and image. You guys managed to balance that gratefully. I guess we bring back the same question to you, Jessica in China.
Can start off. Yeah, I really liked what you were saying about and in your videos, like the correlation of like music and the body movements. And I was thinking, like, as we were talking about our very fragmented otherness way of telling this story, I think because we are very familiar with communication and speaking, but the art of like performance of using body and using voice, like the singing voice, the rapping voice, is extremely vulnerable. I liked that word. And I thought that's sort of like a way of very truly expressing ourselves, but also opening up for a viewer to fully access, not fully access, but to be able to access a bit further than maybe using what we're familiar with, which I thought I really liked Marissa mentioning Billie Eilish, because I actually shared a song with China. I was like, oh, I want to do something like this, because that specific song also used the words. I heard her talking about it as being 100% emotional and spatial. So it was, but also had a weight to it. I can't remember the name, but maybe I'll put it in the chat later of that song. But yeah, it's just, I think it was really a way of using music to open up space further than what we could do with a screen and speakers, to really be able to express and also let others in. And I think, yeah, I think I learned that experience from doing this and want to keep further using it, because I've often found I can sing, and I think it's obviously a really great thing, but I have such trouble getting it out there because it's so vulnerable and personal. But yeah, realizing now that not only it's a way of me truly expressing, but a way of like, yeah, having others really feel what's going on. I think that's what I listen to when I listen to music, and Billie Eilish, her voice as well. I know if China has something to add on your perspective.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. So anyway, in the musical aspect of our film, in the process of thinking of what could be like the feel to be established, I thought that I wanted to create like a beat that would establish the seriousness of like the societal issues being tackled in our film. So yeah, and I think yeah, that's it. That's all.
Well, thank you. Yep, Jann, go on.
Sorry, adding to our choice in music, going back to what we do intend visually, we wanted to feel like a dream sequence, like very like a view to the subconscious. So adding to not only be distracting, but we wanted to feel the music to be atmospheric, like you are trapped in your mind and with the heartbeat. Yeah, it I think it really does serve as a cue to bring the viewers into a more introspective space.
Thank you for that addition. It's fascinating when I'm listening to also what Jessica just pointed out about how the voice, the sound, music, singing is so indicative and connected to the body, and how I guess there's this link towards both films that echoes um, the indexicality of the presence of the body itself, the sound that comes from it, the indexical presence of it as well, juxtaposed into the articulations of how you manifest this nonlinear representation of. I'm thinking when I'm thinking about narrative, it's like beginning end, but there's no really much beginning and end. It kind of fluctuates, and that's I feel like it's almost simultaneously collaging with every nuances of sound and images, and for reasonings, I believe that it really connects those two genres of experimental film from both of you. Yeah, congratulations. We have a question from James, and it's directed to In Our Being. Why do you decided to have the film cut to white at the end instead of having it cut to black? Could you answer that, please? Ghislan or Jann?
That's a really good observation.
Yeah.
I think Jann can more speak to this because I think he definitely took on that aspect in that part of the editing with cutting to the white.
Hello. Yes. So cutting to white was a intentional decision in the ending. I wanted the end after that merging of the body and mind to feel cathartic, like referencing back to those films where they're dying and the flashing of memories are all flooding in. And I wanted to emulate that feeling in the film where that longing of having oneness, especially being intersectional queer people of color, we always have that. Sorry, queer people that exist in post-colonial world. I think there's always that social disconnect from how people see you and how you inherently feel. So in that film, we wanted the conclusion to be like a reclaiming of that narrative of finding oneness in that ever ever contrasting senses of self. And yeah, I wanted it to fade to white to allude to that feeling of catharsis when you do find that stillness and peace within yourself.
Mm-hmm. And it really, really highlighted the juxtaposition between the black backdrop that is so predominant within the actual visuals, and to just kind of jolt. It's like someone turning on the light, like, but it's also, I can see it's becomes this kind of like, is it about whitewashing the color? Right. So all of this kind of issue starts to manifest while we're viewing it, which I find quite interesting. Yeah. Great question. Thank you. We also have one from an anonymous attendee is the name for the film by, again, Madariaga and Timm. Do you have experience in creating experimental film before? And what's your creative influences in creating your experimental film In Our Being? And maybe this was answered earlier on, I'm not sure. But also, I mean, we can also retrieve this back to both films and how both films really pushes those kind of ideologies of narratives and experimental. Your answer, Jann or Ghislan?
Yeah, definitely. I've worked with experimental filmmaking before. It's like kind of like my comfort zone, especially when telling personal narratives. And
creative influences involved in like the collage making was definitely Romare Bearden and Deborah Roberts, who are two Black African American collage artists. One had passed away. Another one is like contemporary. And so that was somebody who I referenced in the early beginning when making collages. And as well as there's a documentary that came out, or it was a docu-series on Toni Morrison's called The Pieces I Am, and the beginning trailer where you see the collages making up her body while exploring her life's work and experiences while quoting, which I think it was created by Micheline Thomas, also as well contributed to my process in creating work and contributing to, as well as Jann's works of how to merge the bodies together.
So yeah, on my end, I don't really have a lot of experience in primary at making experimental film. So I when I was trying to decide on what kind of visuals I wanted to create, I knew that I wanted it to be experimental and surrealistic, but considering my lack of substantial film history knowledge, I didn't really know any specific references. So when I was communicating with Ghislan, since our way of exchanging information was merely visual, that research process of finding examples that really represent how I wanted to make the film, how I wanted it to feel, really was a learning process, since there I was able to find some film of Dadaism and Surrealism in some certain film archives, and yeah, that then I guess it kind of developed into that, but it wasn't really at the beginning intentional.
Thank you. Any kind of quick reflection, Jessica, China, about the, and I know it's experimentation within the archival footage with music. If you were to kind of briefly just summarize any kind of reflection towards that as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking back on, I think it's experimental, especially music video has been, now I realize, shaped my whole look on how I create. And I'm a drawing painting major, so it's very different realm. But I actually started making like small archival footage cuts, like mini films, and realized there's such a directness in that said things that it took me a long time to get to in drawing and painting. And that was actually inspired by, I used Chinese hip hop as a gateway to reconnect with my culture. And the music videos are just like, not many rules, and very expressive and bold and raw. And that inspired me. I now realize, even through this, that it has shaped how I make, because it gives me a tool for me to be direct and get a message out, as well as be ambiguous and have that atmosphere there. So yeah, so important.
Thank you so much. So I guess before we wrap up, I'm gonna bring it back to both faculties, Marissa and Richard. I also want to just congratulate all of the students here for a great work and very compelling topic to talk about. Marissa?
Just congratulations to all. What a fantastic way to end a week of screenings. Beautiful, beautiful work.
And yes, congratulations. I mean, I think they're really extremely successful as collaborations, because that's the other thing, is to have two people who, I mean, it's hard to collaborate when someone's sitting in the room with you. When someone's sitting on the other end of the world, it's even more challenging. And they really are very successful works. So yeah, really congratulations. And congratulations on the team for having done this.
And Marissa, would you like to end us off?
So on behalf of Narratives Through a Global Space, the entire team, we would like to thank the audience, those of you who are joining us through Zoom and through OCAD U Live, both in the Philippines and in Canada and all around. Thank you for being a fantastic audience. Maraming salamat to our guest discussant, Professor Richard Fung, for his insightful evaluation of the films that brings in his wealth of knowledge and experience in both making and critiquing film. What a treat to have you share a virtual space with us today. I know that our students were very excited to have you as a discussant. So thank you very much. To our faculty members, Professor Manapul, Professor Waldberger, Professor Chavez, and Professor Ong, and the other faculty and staff of Mapua University and OCAD University. Thank you to today's filmmakers, Ghislan, Jane, China, and Jessica. To our promotional partners, Real Asian International Film Festival. To those who are working behind the scenes, through OCAD U IT and OCAD U Live. A big thank you to Renzi, Sayeda, and Adam for helping us through the technical glitches and making this event so extremely successful and seamless. To the Collaborative Online International Learning staff, Jasmine Cardenas Obando and Jenny Sudik, thank you very much. To President Ana Serrano for her generous support and solidarity throughout this entire event, and a big round of applause and a big thank you and salamat to all of our participating filmmakers who have all presented their masterpieces this week and have also been present in the audience. So a big thank you to all of you. I really believe that this is just the beginning of amazing careers, of amazing productions to come. It is so inspiring to see such talent and promise so early on in your careers. And I encourage you to continue on. So thank you very much.
And I also want to thank you to Professor Marissa Largo for really helping us through this presentation and connectivity. And I'm just so happy that we finally saw the end of it, but not the end, because hopefully all of these ideas can manifest to next projects. And I just wanted to address how important it is to create a platform for people of color, people of diversity, and I guess kicking off Pride weekend in Toronto this Friday. Also, how important to create a platform for voices that we don't necessarily hear within the mainstream, and how important it is to create those dialogues continuously as a way of enlightening and opening up people's perspectives and notions. So congratulations, and thank you so much for being part of this thematic entitled Narrative Through Global Space. Until next time, in a future project, I'll see you guys in the future. Take care.
Thank you so much.